Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. This video is going to be a wrap-up of what I read in the month of June. I was looking back at what I'd read, and I normally use Goodreads to keep track of what I read in the yearly challenge. And for a while there, I was kind of locked out of Goodreads. I kept telling it to reset my password and it just wouldn't send me the email. So I was finishing books and not necessarily marking them as read in Goodreads. So I feel like I might have forgotten a book or two and I'll think of it later. But I'll talk about the ones that I know for sure I finished last month. Of course, I'm midway through several more that I haven't finished yet, and I will talk about those when I complete them. I'm pretty proud of myself for the books I read in June because they were all books that I own, which is great. So I'm making progress in cleaning up my bookshelf TBR. The first book is a relatively new arrival, which I'm sure that you've heard people discussing on YouTube, Kaikai. This is a retelling of the epic story of Kaikai, which I was not familiar with before I read this novel. So I will put that out in the open. This was not mythology that I intimately knew of. However, from reading interviews with the author, I gathered that Kaikai is a character who is often portrayed as the villain, kind of the evil, selfish stepmother who ruined a kingdom. And when she wrote this novel, she intended to tell Kaikai's side of the story, and she's done a really excellent job. Kaikai possesses a very peculiar type of magic where she can see the threads that bind people together, and she can pull on them a little bit and influence them. The story opens with her as a young child kind of learning of this power, and then it does span a great period of time as she eventually leaves her home. She marries a foreign king and starts a family there, and there's some dynastic politics that occur. So there are time jumps within the story, but it's basically really centers on Kaikai's relationships with those that she loves and how she's trying to help others. There's a little bit of societal commentary there as well because she can be forward thinking in some aspects compared to what the culture surrounding her is used to. And it truly is an epic story of how she impacted essentially these political dynamics between the kingdom that she was born in and the kingdom that she married into, how her brother, the king, where she came from, interacts with her husband, the king where she is, her son, who is supposed to be the heir, etc., etc. I really like the subtle magic of the ties that bind, and also how that interplays with a greater magic of the gods that are worshipped in this story. So as far as a retelling, this one to me was very fresh, it was unique, and it was very interesting, and it delved into some storytelling that I had never heard of before. So if you're interested in that, I recommend this one. The next book I read was a find at the used bookstore, and actually I went to the store precisely hoping that they would have this one because I almost got a Book of the Month subscription just to receive this one. The Hacienda, which I describe as a Mexican Gothic story, and then realize, oh yeah, there's the novel, the Gothic story called Mexican Gothic, meets Rebecca. So just by hearing those comps, I love a good Gothic storytelling with a little bit of that supernatural element to the house, like what is going on here, that mystery to the setting, which I think is what draws me to Susanna Kearsley novels because she does that so well. This is set after the Mexican Revolution and the founding of Mexico as a republic in the 1820s. Isabel is a young woman who lost her family basically in the revolution and now is marrying into a wealthier family for stability, and she and her new husband move out to La Hacienda, the house that he owns on this, his family has grown wealthy by farming agave, which they turn into alcohol. So she moves out to the countryside, to this house, and there is something very wrong with this house, and she almost seems like she's going crazy, like she's the only one that can tell, and then she slowly realizes that some of the other people who live out there know, and they're just trying to hush it up. Even though she is not very religious, she enlists the help of some of the local priests to do an exorcism on the house, and it turns out that one of the priests that she speaks with grew up at that house, knows something's wrong with it, and he is actually a witch. So they work together to try to put this house right. I really enjoyed the Hacienda. I sat down and read it basically in one day, and I'm really happy I was able to find it at the bookstore. And the one that I found was actually someone had sold their Book of the Month edition, which was kind of interesting. I've never had a Book of the Month subscription. I didn't realize that they, logo the novels, but they do. Also, hopefully there's not a glare, but I think the cover does an excellent job of selling what's going on in the story. Creepy haunted house out in the country, woman trying to figure it out, feeling like she's going a little bit mad because it seems like no one believes her, and it's a dark story. Next, I read a popular science fiction story where, to tell the truth, this was my third attempt at reading it. I picked up the physical copy and didn't get very far because of the writing style. So then I tried the audiobook, and although I really, really liked the audiobook, I was getting hung up on one of the storytelling narrative devices at the very beginning of the story, which is the character dealing with amnesia. It's not my favorite trope. Anyway, the book I'm talking about is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, his most recent release. My husband was listening to the audiobook of it and just kept looking at me like, I cannot believe that you put this book down and haven't picked it back up again, because this is such a you story. So it really inspired me to pick it up again. Third time's the charm. This time I got past the kind of beginning amnesia part of the story. And about a third of the way through the story, the narrative changes. And from that point, I was very hooked and didn't want to stop listening to the audiobook. I was just kind of roaming around the house listening so I could find out what happened. The story is a dual timeline novel following an astronaut named Grace, who is on a spaceship on a mission to save humanity. So the past storyline, what is the problem? How did they get here? What is humanity's goal to try to fix it, is interwoven with the present of him actually on the mission trying to solve the problem. And all is not as it appears, and there's also a different layer to the story that comes in, which, if you've heard anyone talk about the story, they might have told you what it is, but I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to spoil it. But basically is rather delightful, and one of my new favorite characters was introduced in this novel. In the end, I found it very compelling and very well done, but for whatever reason, I had to get past the first little bit. I had to get over a first little hump with the amnesia. Looking back on it, it makes total sense why that was the way that it was. So if you were having the same hangups that I was having, keep going. Keep reading. I think that it will be worth it to you. And also, if given the choice between reading it and listening to the audiobook, I think that the narrative style and the writing style of this story is very apt for listening to an audio narrative of it. Project Hail Mary, third time's the charm. I ended up really, really enjoying it, and I'm glad that I gave it another chance. The last book that I finished this month, or at least that I remember finishing this month, is a self-published fantasy romance called Rain and Ruin by J.D. Evans. I saw the series recommended on Joshana's channel. It is a very politics-heavy story. We have leaders of opposing kingdoms at odds, in addition to a very unique and interesting magic structure where some aspects of the magic are praised and other aspects of the magic there's prejudice against people who can do that, which plays into how these people live. The main character is the king's daughter. He is an ailing king, and she has started stepping up and taking over slowly but surely, replacing her father as he ages and having to do battle with his counselors who want to take that power for themselves. So she sends out a request for a treaty to a neighboring kingdom that they've kind of been on edge with for generations. The king's brother, who is the general of the armies, winds up coming to the princess's kingdom to try to work out a deal for both sides. Politics happen, a sort of forbidden romance story happens. It's really well written and a very good story. And I've started the next book in the series, which Shoshana recommended as her favorite so far, and it's going very well. That completes my wrap up for the month of June. Halfway through the year already. I can't believe it. I'm happy with the books that I read this month. I think I rated them all very highly, which is great. I don't think I DNF'd anything. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned today. Is there a book where you have put it down a couple of times and then finally picked it up and it clicked with you? Let me know what that novel was below. And as always, don't forget to support your local library. Thanks.